Good evening, everyone. Welcome to a special edition of Science on Tap Minocqua. Thanks for coming. My name is Susan Knight. Science on Tap is an example of the Wisconsin idea, an idea conceived in 1905 that the boundaries of the university are the boundaries of the state. Our partners in Science on Tap include the Lakeland chapter of the Wisconsin Alumni Association, UW Kemp Natural Resources Station, UW Trout Lake Station, WXPR, the Brittingham Fund Grant to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and though we are usually at Rocky Reef Brewing Company, today we are at the Minocqua Public Library. I know all of you know where you are, but hopefully we have a few people online, so we're just establishing exactly where we are. So, and our special sponsor tonight is the Wisconsin Academy. I'm going to leave it there. They're going to say more about that. And we'll go ahead and let Lizzie from the Wisconsin Academy say a few words.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. I'm Lizzie Condon. I work for the Wisconsin Academy of Sciences, Arts, and Letters. So hi to everybody in the room and hi to everybody online as well. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, the Wisconsin Academy creates many diverse opportunities for people to connect, learn, and collaborate. Everything from public talks like this, courses, and art exhibitions, to our magazine, which is Wisconsin People and Ideas. And I have our most recent copy here. Everyone that's here can take one home for free, and it has information on the Women in Waters exhibit. So please feel free to take that, and you can take an older copy of the magazine too. I'm happy to distribute that here today. I work on our climate and energy initiative along with Jess James, who's here as well, and she's a remote employee who works in Rhinelander. I came up from Madison. We also support annual awards for poetry and fiction by Wisconsin writers, which you can learn more about in the magazine. The Academy Fellows Awards, the Wisconsin Poet Laureate, and many other endeavors that connect Wisconsin people and ideas. We're a statewide organization. If you want to learn more about what we do, you can sign up for our email list. You can do that right out there. We're really excited about partnering with Science on Tap Minocqua and the Trout State Limnology Station to present Mary Burns' talk tonight. Mary's exhibition, Women and Water, Woven Portraits from Around the World, is on view at our James Watrous Gallery, which is in downtown Madison on State Street through February 4th. So definitely check that out if you find yourself down in Madison. Thank you so much. Excited to be here.
Okay, and we're just going to conduct this pretty much like a Science on Tap. So reminder that our next regular Science on Tap event will be February 1st back at Rocky Reef Brewing Company, where Peter Levi from Northland College will be speaking on the Mississippi River watershed. And before I go any further, I want to tell you about a special event at Kemp Natural Resources Station. It's this Saturday at 1 p.m. in the Connor Forestry Center at Kemp Station. You don't have to register. And this is an event kind of fitting in with our theme here tonight. Students of the Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design have been at Kemp Station since last weekend to complete a series of short-term research studies on the ecology of the forests and/or lakes in the area. Stepping out of their academic comfort zone and stepping into the natural sciences, our students majoring in fine arts, illustration, or communication design. So everyone is invited to hear short summary presentations of their findings from the week-long field research, exploring a variety of ecological aspects and including an overview of their art design work. Topics can range from what drives biodiversity to management strategies and everything in between, depending on each student's personal interest. So come and see the aftermath of their endeavors. This is not the first time they've done it, and it was very, very well received last year. So I hope a number of you can get over to Kemp and see that again. Saturday, January 13th at 1 p.m. Okay. So moving on, tonight we have a very special return engagement with Mary Burns. Mary Burns was a Science on Tap speaker for us a couple of years ago. And Mary's going to tell us about her studio practice and weaving technique. And we'll hear some stories behind the Woven Portraits of the Women in Water exhibit that is now at the James Watrous Gallery in Madison that Lizzie just talked about. Mary Burns is an award-winning fiber artist and master weaver Mary's participated in numerous science and art collaborations and has been an artist in residence at Andrews Forest in Oregon and at our own UW Trout Lake Station in Boulder Junction. Mary's latest exhibit, Women and Water, Woven Portraits from Around the World, is the subject of tonight's presentation. In another acclaimed project, Mary's Ancestral Women exhibit features woven portraits of an elder from each of Wisconsin's 12 native tribes. That exhibit has traveled extensively. Mary earned her BA from UW Green Bay. Mary has been weaving since she was a teenager and continues to love it. She teaches fiber art classes, and with her husband, John Bates, leads natural history outings for many local organizations. She and John live in her grandparents' home on the Manitowish River, which has been in their family since 1925. And per our tradition, here is your trivia story about Mary Burns. And if you haven't been to a Science on Tap, we always do a trivia about our speaker that they don't know about ahead of time. Mary may have always had an interest in weaving, but it wasn't a full-time occupation. What other activities was Mary involved with when she was living in the Green Bay area? A, she raised timber wolves with the intent of reintroducing them to northern Wisconsin, and sometimes she drove them around in her car. Number B, she raised and showed llamas at a llama expositions all over the Midwest. One year, her two-toned llama came in first place. Or C, she was contracted to grow a whole garden of poisonous and toxic plants for a UW Bay botany professor. All right, so you've got timber wolves, llamas, or poisonous plants? Llamas. Do we have another call? Poisonous plants. Any other guesses? Timber wolves. Here's Mary.
Thank you, Susan. That was very entertaining. Thanks for being here tonight. I'd like to thank the Academy and Trout Lake Station for their wonderful support of my work. So let's get started. So there we are, Women in Water, and this is a slide from the exhibit in Madison right now. So the exhibit is made to celebrate water by honoring and celebrating women who work with water, advocate for it, and protect it. These are all hand-woven portraits that I do in my studio, and I'm sorry for those of you who are on the YouTube channel, but I did bring a couple portraits in person so the people here can actually see what they look like close up. So there are some additional goals that I want the exhibit to work with, and that is to bring attention to water and water issues, to inspire people to take action to protect our waters, and to communicate science and social issues through art, to open our hearts. So the exhibit is global. There are women from around the world, and this illustration shows most of the locations where women from the exhibit are located. In the exhibit, there are 29 portraits representing 39 women from over 20 countries, plus women who work in the Arctic and Antarctic. And I want to say that I am really honored to do this work, to bring the stories of these women to the public, because there are many women here in the exhibit who they aren't getting any notoriety, but they're doing amazing things. So we have women from Ontario to Mozambique to our own Trout Lake Station, from Peru to the oceans of the world to the kingdom of Tonga. So I am just going to give a brief overview of a few of the women in the exhibit, and then I am going to concentrate more on women in water sciences. So the exhibit started with in 2016, and I was inspired by the women in the Native communities who I got to know through my Ancestor Women exhibit. And grandmother Josephine Mandamin Ba from Ontario was, I should say, just a wonderful person, and she led numerous water walks. And the water walk is a sacred journey around or along a body of water to help raise awareness for that water. It is said that she walked over 15,000 miles for water in her lifetime. So she's the first person I contacted about the exhibit, and the first weaving that I did, she gave me her blessing to do this work. Tinker Schumann, who happens to be a dear friend and is sitting in the back of the room tonight, hi Tinker, is an elder from Lac du Flambeau. She is a poet, a healer, an educator, and many other wonderful attributes. She coordinated the water walks in Lac du Flambeau. So we have activists from around the world. Wilma Mankiller is known to some of you probably because she was the first female chief of the Cherokee. But she was before she became the chief of the Cherokee, she was an activist, and one of the things that she did is for this little town of Bell, Oklahoma, they had no running water. So she organized the community to install their own water pipe to bring fresh water to their community. Another person in the exhibit is Ruth Buendia from Peru, and she organized her community, well actually it was numerous communities along the Aire River in Peru to protest and stop a dam going in which would have ruined their sacred stream. And then Ikal Angale from Kenya is the founder and director of Friends of Lake Turkana, and she and her group have been working to safeguard Lake Turkana. There have been dams built upstream in Ethiopia that have dramatically affected the water levels. Other activists include Monica Lewis-Patrick, who is known as the Water Warrior. She founded We the People of Detroit, and they work on water issues and humanitarian issues in Detroit. Nafisa Barrett from Gujarat, India. She is very amazing. I had some wonderful Zoom conversations with her. She is a water activist and a social activist as well in a very arid region of Western India. Berta Kacer is from Honduras. Berta had, her story is really deeply touching. She was an environmentalist and a human rights activist. She worked to organize her native people to protest and stop a dam going in on their sacred waters. And Honduras was a very difficult country to live in and be an environmental activist. In the year leading up to her death, 100 activists, environmental activists were murdered, and she and her organization stopped the dam, but she lost her life. She was assassinated. Anyway, we move on. So, bringing us to the scientists. So I want to start with a couple of local people. Emily Stanley and Carol Warden are in the portrait on the left here, and they both are associated with the University of Wisconsin and Trout Lake Station. Emily is an award-winning limnology professor, and she's a researcher. She researches aquatic ecosystems, focusing primarily on streams and lakes. And Carol Warden, who is here tonight, hello, Carol, wherever you are, is a researcher and educator and was formerly an invasive species specialist at Trout Lake Station. Gretchen Garish is the director of Trout Lake Station. She's an educator and a researcher. She also specializes in something that's not native to the North Woods at all. She works as a researcher on bioluminescent ostracods in the Caribbean, research that's funded by the National Science Foundation, and her work has been featured by David Attenborough in one of his documentaries called Light on Earth. Other activists include Asha DeVos from Sri Lanka. Asha is a marine biologist. In fact, she is the only marine biologist in all of Sri Lanka. She founded an organization called Ocean Swell, and they work with the only non-migratory blue whale population that is known in the world. She is coming to the United States, and she's been getting some press here, which is really wonderful to see. Her group does research, education, and conservation. Victoria Bushman is actually originally from Alaska. She is the first doctor of conservation biology as an Inuit, and she works in Greenland at the moment and is a researcher, and she really tries to bring indigenous knowledge to all decisions being made about the Arctic. And who do we have next? Limnologists, and these are probably people you are not familiar with. Kathleen Carpenter from Wales. She was an educator, a writer, a professor. She taught in Wales and also taught at a couple different universities here in the United States. She's considered the mother of freshwater ecology. She wrote the first limnology textbook in English in 1928. Mary Alice McWhinney from DePaul University was a very important person in Antarctic research. And the fact that she kind of opened the doors for women scientists to work in Antarctica. In 1962, she was the first woman researcher to be allowed to work on the NSF research vessel in Antarctica. In 1974, she became the first woman scientist to overwinter at McMurdo Station, where she later went on to become chief scientist of that station. And then she was the first woman scientist to work at Palmer Station as well. One of the things that was so special about her is that people vied to work with her because she was the leading expert on actually on creel. One of the things they've said about her is she pushed the boundaries of science in extreme environments and really did open the door for women scientists in Antarctica, where, I mean, it's not that many years ago, and the attitude by a lot of the administrators toward women was, well, I'd say kind of Neanderthal. Many of you know who Rachel Carson is. She was a writer, a biologist, an editor. She worked for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. But we've found through this exhibit and having woven a portrait of her that many young people have no clue of who she is, or was, I should say. So in the 50s, she was doing this work for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, but on the side she was writing books, and she was one of the foremost favorite authors in North America. She wrote 3 books about the sea. But in 1962, she came out with her book called Silent Spring, and in that book she was exposing the dangers of long-term usage of pesticides, especially DDT, on the environment and on human health. So her work brought all of this information to the public for the first time. And it is through her work that people became aware of what was going on, and really the environmental movement owes her a great deal of debt because she really was the inspiration. And she was the inspiration for the establishment of the EPA and for the passage of the Clean Water Act. She suffered greatly, many horrible attacks by the science community and by some of the chemical industry because they didn't agree with what she was saying, but it wasn't just what she said, it was the fact that she was a woman. And she was harassed, called a communist, a hysterical woman, a spinster, out of control. She had outstepped her bounds scientifically. I mean, it was just horrible. Unfortunately, she died in 1964 before all the effects that people she couldn't see how much she had affected the world. Sylvia Earle is an amazing person. I mean, there's all this stuff on the screen that you can read about her, but some of the other things that you might not know about Sylvia is that she was a National Geographic Explorer in residence. The Library of Congress called her a living legend. Time magazine called her hero of the planet. She is a former chief scientist for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. She has led over 100 expeditions. She's a cutting-edge oceanographer. And now she is 86 or 87, and she is still diving, and she's still traveling the globe, giving presentations. She is the founder of an organization called Mission Blue, whose goal is to set aside sanctuaries within the oceans. And so far, they have 140 hope spots, they're called, across the globe. Some other people you may not be familiar with who are also in the exhibit, Sandra Postel. She's from the United States. She's an author, a communicator. She's a global water policy specialist. She founded it as the director of the Global Water Policy Project. And their goal is to bridge water science, policy, and practice. And she works to bring natural solutions to our water issues. From 2009 to 2015, she was a freshwater fellow for the National Geographic. In 2015, she won the U.S. Water Prize, and in 2021, she won the Stockholm Water Prize. And the Stockholm Water Prize it's like the Nobel Prize for water work. It's really very prestigious. And I would like to quote her. "We talk about water as a right, but it is really the planet's greatest gift, a gift to be shared with all life. I believe we have an ethical responsibility to manage water in such a way that all living beings, human and non-human, receive the water they need to survive." She was wonderful to work with. Very, very helpful. And then Marina Rykovanova from Siberia. She is a biologist and an activist. And she grew up going to Lake Baikal. Lake Baikal, if you're not familiar with it, is the largest freshwater lake in the world by volume. It's just, it's an incredible body of water. And as a biologist, she was seeing a lot of problems with the lake becoming polluted, especially from a paper mill on the shores of the lake. So she organized a group called Baikal Environmental Wave, and they worked to close that mill down, and they were successful. They got the mill closed down, and then they also were able to influence the government enough to reroute a proposed pipeline that was coming very close to the lake. However, in 2016, the government raided their offices, closed them down, called them foreign agents. So we haven't been able to find any recent information about her, and frankly, I'm concerned for her welfare. So the next part of the talk, I would like to talk about the Joint Aquatic Sciences meeting. The Joint Aquatic Sciences group is composed of 9 environmental water groups, and every 2 years they have an international meeting. So I was invited through Trout Lake Station to take what I had of the exhibit completed in the spring of 2022 to the conference, where there were over 2,500 attendees and representing 57 countries. It was amazing. And the reception we got with the exhibit was really heartwarming and inspiring for me. Prior to going to the meeting, though, I had been in contact with the African Center for Aquatic Research and Education, ACARE. And every year they sponsor a cohort of young women scientists. And I knew they were bringing the 2022 group to the meeting, so I arranged to meet with them. So John and I actually had several opportunities to spend time with the women, and they were all so interesting and amazing. Now, they all work on the African Great Lakes. So the African Great Lakes, which a lot of people have never heard of, comprise 25% of the world's fresh water, and it's essential to 62 million people. So the women have various expertise. Some of them are limnologists, some are fisheries specialists, but they all work on this system of lakes. And Lake Victoria is the second largest in the world by surface area. Lake Tanganyika is the second largest by volume. And 10% of all the freshwater fish in the world live in this system. So to compare that to our Great Lakes, we have 23% of the world's fresh water. Lake Superior is the largest freshwater lake in the world by surface area. However, Lake Baikal is the largest by volume. It has 22% of the fresh water in the world. And you can see how incredibly deep Lake Baikal is compared to our Great Lakes. So I thought that the women would, pick, if they liked the exhibit, they would pick one of them to be in the exhibit, but they all wanted to be in the exhibit, so I wove 3 portraits with 3 women in each of them, and I did bring one of those tonight for you to see. I brought Catherine and Elizabeth and Margaret's weaving. They were really wonderful. So just a little bit about my weaving. The background, I weave on a jacquard loom, or a loom that is inspired by the jacquard weaving process. So on my loom, I have the black warp threads. If you want to see that, it's they're slightly heavier than sewing thread. I have 44 of these threads. Actually, it's 45 every inch. And I can control each one individually. So historically, Joseph Marie Jacquard was born into a weaving family. His family had a mill in France, but he was also a mathematician. And he wanted to improve the speed with which pattern weaving occurred. So he developed this loom. This is actually, the photo is, or the drawing is not the original loom. The original loom was like a story and a half tall, and it had 2 weavers. Anyway, what the deal is that he took cards and he punched holes in them for where the hooks had to go down and lift the correct warp threads up to make the pattern. This eventually became more automated, and the cards in the photo here, the cards are running on the top, but eventually they're laced together and run on the side. But it's the precursor to the computer. It's a punched card system, a binary system. And you can see in the far right a series of those cards all linked together. So my loom, which my husband says looks like a dishwasher, which I don't know if I like that, but we don't have a dishwasher either, so I guess it's okay. Anyway, my loom now works with the computer. So I program the computer to lift the correct threads. There's a vacuum pump. So there's a hose that looks like it's coming out of my head. It goes into the back of the loom, and it actually does the lifting of those threads. So if I wanted to lift one single thread, I could, or if I wanted to lift, half of them or whatever, I'm able to do that. I'm able to draw that design into my pattern and then assign the weave structures, and the right threads get lifted as I'm throwing the shuttle. This is what my shuttles look like. So for this exhibit, I started the work in 2016, but I started weaving in 2017, and I finished the last portrait last spring. So I figure in weaving all of these, including weaving my samples, which I brought a few for people to look at. I probably threw one of my shuttles 70,000 times. So I do have some tendinitis in my thumbs, and I can't quite figure out why that happened. So the future. Exhibit in diverse venues, and in fact, I've got a really exciting possibility coming up. The woman from India, Nafisa Barrett, who I talked about at the beginning, she and her organization, Yutan, have just contacted me, and they would like to collaborate and possibly take the exhibit and presentations to Bangkok, which is just amazing. So that leads me directly into the second thing, explore additional funding sources, because we have to raise funds to do that. But mainly, I want to inspire people to take action, to protect our water, to become water advocates. And then my wonderful husband and I put together a book which tells in detail the stories of all of the women, and there are lots of photos too. He's remarkable. If you don't know my husband, John Bates, he's right back there. So lots of people to thank, organizations to thank, including Trout Lake Station, Wisconsin Arts Board, with the Wisconsin Academy, and water. This is the calendar so far and leading into the future, and I just want to point out to some people were looking forward to the exhibit being in the Chicago area for 3 months this spring. That has been postponed until next year. So if you were planning to see us in Naperville, hopefully next year. And we will be back in the Northwoods. The exhibit closes, it runs through the 4th in Madison at the Watrous Gallery, And then it's going to take a siesta because the Chicago event isn't happening. And we will be back in the North Woods at Art Start in Rhinelander August 15th through October 26th. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. And now we have time for questions, and Amber is in the back, and if you would, please wait until she comes to you with this microphone, and please put it right at your mouth, okay? That's really important so our online people can hear.
Hi, I caught your exhibit when it was up at the Northern Great Lakes Visitor Center. And I also read the companion book, and
Thank you.
wow, those stories in there are astounding. So I would read like one story each day because it's like a lot to like digest and really think about. So having seen some of the portraits and reading the stories, I still can't wrap my mind around this scope of this project. So my question is, could you speak a little bit about your research process and how you are finding these women and these incredible stories, and also how you are selecting the images to weave?
Sure, a great question. The research was extensive. It was really hard and challenging. I just started going through, mostly via the internet, looking at people doing different water projects around the world. And sometimes I was able to just directly communicate with people, and that was great. Other times I contacted organizations that they were affiliated with, or contacted organizations where they had won awards. So a number of the women in the exhibit won Goldman Environmental Prize awards, and that's really a big, big deal. And I worked through Goldman to contact those women. So I was able to do that, and that really helped a lot. Other times, it was like someone I knew someone, like the women from Mozambique that I wove. A friend had been to to Gorongosa National Park, and he had a friend who worked in the park, and that was my connection into the park, and talking to them and communicating back and forth. We had like a gazillion emails, trying to come up with the right story, or someone knew someone else, and that really helped narrow things down. But I was still looking to finalize some things last year. So it's been a challenge, and I would ask people, if you know anybody that you think would be interested in being in the exhibit, please let me know. So that helped.
Time for more questions? Still got the microphone?
We'll do an online
Got an
question.
online question?
What do you think? So this question is, does she have other series ideas, or will she continue with water protectors?
Well, I think I'm still recovering from weaving all these. No, I actually have been working on some individual pieces, but not on a series. I feel like I'm not done with the Women in Water exhibit, in part because I want to do a lot of outreach and try to get the exhibit out to many different localities. So no, I do not have a series. My husband is very thankful that I don't have a new series that I'm weaving, but you never know.
For either of these portraits, how many hours goes into the production of each one?
That's really hard because the design aspect takes so long. So when I first started doing the portraits for the Ancestral Women exhibit, it was taking me a month of working and reworking. When I did that exhibit, I'd never done portraiture before. So I end up working in the computer, drawing and redrawing the designs, and then going to the loom and sampling. So sometimes with those portraits in particular, I was weaving up to a yard's worth of samples before I actually got to the weaving. So once I get the design to a point where I really like it, I can weave that portrait pretty quickly. But it's the lead up to that that's so time consuming.
You mentioned you have samples up there. Maybe you can hold one of those and explain a few things about them.
Sure. So I don't know if the people online can see this, but these little panels, the top one is Sylvia Earle, and I struggled and struggled because how do you weave a portrait of someone underwater? And it was, it wasn't as bright as I wanted it to be. Oh, that'd be great. Thank you. So these little panels in here, all those are different areas of the design, and I'd sample to see, well, is it coming out the way I want it to? Am I getting enough contrast? Are the details showing? So then the portrait at the bottom is Sharon Day from the Twin Cities. She's a water walker as well. And the design wasn't bright enough. I had to really go back and play with that. Sometimes that's, I think, good enough. That's, I really worked with to get their eyes right, and those two pieces, it's not showing that as well. But this is the original design I had for Marina Rickavanova at the bottom, and it just wasn't working. It had no pop to it. It wasn't representing her in a way that I felt honored her. So the design at the top is actually what I ended up going with, but I did do some changes from this to the final one. But for her piece, I put Lake Baikal in the background. So then these, thank you, Susan, these reverse very unusually. So you always want to have the front side out. Oh. Thank you. And this is the thread, if anyone wants to see that. That's the warp. And then for the weft, I'm using anywhere from 3 to 5 threads that are different shades that I blend on this bobbin, and it goes into my shuttle. So you can see that after. And then I do weave in full color as well. This is my little hummingbird. So it's not always two-tone. I think there was another question.
So there's so many interesting parts about this, especially your process, and I'm curious if there was anything in particular that you learned as an artist about your process through this long project, and what are you most proud of about this project?
Well, I learned a lot about portraiture. I think that I'm continually refining what I do, and I've actually called my loom, whose name is Bridget after my great-grandma. I've called that loom my anti-Alzheimer loom because every single time I weave, I'm learning something. And it's amazing. And I still absolutely love weaving. I'm just nuts about it, you know, and it's, people say, well, aren't you going to retire sometime soon? And I'm like, no, I really like what I do. And about the exhibit, I'm most proud to bring these women's stories. I mean, the exhibit is about them, and bring their stories and to the public and pass that information on.
I've got another online question here. Can you tell us a little more about the water walkers in the upper Midwest? Are those walks continuing today?
Well, we should probably have Tinker talk about that, but the water walks are continuing. Lots of communities have them, and Lac du Flambeau is not having them right now, but I know one walk goes around Lake Winnebago every year. They do it in the summer. They walk completely around the lake. Sharon Day in Minneapolis, who I showed you the sample for her weaving, she has an organization, I think it's NEBI Walks, and she does walks every year, and the organization does walks as well. I think they're doing walks weekly, but last summer she organized a walk around Lake Superior. And so check her out. She's really, really doing wonderful work. She's done the Missouri River, I think, twice. Yeah, she would be the most known person right now in the area, region.
Why did, you said you sometimes do full color. Why did you choose to use the sepia tones for the portraits?
I like the idea of just showing the women, not being distracted by color. I just want it kind of stripped down. So it's the design. It's the essence to me.
Who's the woman on the right?
Oh, that is Tawera Tahuri. She's from New Zealand. She's an educator and a water walker. So she was actually in the United States visiting in the northwestern part of the country. And she met Grandmother Josephine. Josephine was getting ready to do her walk from the Pacific to Lake Superior that year. And she so inspired her that Tawera went home and started water walks in New Zealand. So she also is an artist. She does installation work, pretty interesting. And I talked to her about what she would like to see if she had a sacred water that she would like me to illustrate in the weaving. And so she sent me a bunch of pictures, and this is the confluence of two sacred streams coming together. And then at the bottom, I put in the design of a paddle that has traditional patterning on it. So there are 29 weavings in the entire exhibit, and the gallery, Watrous Gallery in Madison, had space for 23. So that's why I have a few of the weavings that I could bring tonight.
Any more questions? One from Noah.
This one might be a little bit more of like a technical one. So you start with an image that they send you, or is it like you see a couple how do you actually draw them on a computer? Are you like I'm really interested in sort of that technical, how you develop that digital image that then gets translated to the loop.
Sure. So I can start with a combination of things like photographs. And usually I would work off of photographs that the women would provide, but sometimes they weren't providing them. But anyway, I started with photographs. In some cases, I'll draw things out, and then I'll scan the photograph and the drawing together into the computer, and then I'll work with different layers. Like with Tawara's piece, I had the whole background that I designed off of photos she sent me, and working primarily in Photoshop. And then I worked on her portrait based on another photo, and I worked on the paddle design at the base. So I had those all on different layers, and like with the paddle, I had drawn that out based on images that I saw in photos that she had sent me. So then I simplify. I've got to go from thousands of shades down to what I think I can handle on the loom. And in general, these are all less than 20 different shades, but it's, I put the design, once I get that redrawing done in Photoshop, I put it in my weaving program. So I have a weave program called Point Carré. It's an industrial program, and I use about, like a little tiny bit of this massive industrial program. But it's so wonderful because it helps me to reduce the complexity. So I can go in and I have thousands of shades, and I start playing with, it'll give me all the percentages of, some shades in that have like a 0.1% or whatever. So anyway, I can combine things. And I work through that to do that. Then I assign a weave structure to each of those shades. So the weave structures will either bring the black, so the blackest value is bringing almost all the black warp up to the surface. And the lightest value is showing most of the color that's on the shuttle to the surface. So from the black, I gradually reduce how much of the black warp is coming up till I get to that lightest value, and it's almost all that that shuttle, the yarn from the shuttle. So it's a lot of experimenting. And then going back and forth between the computer and the loom, trying to see, well, is this working or not? You should come and see the loom. Bring your boys. Kids love it.
Any more questions? Okay, well, thank you, Mary. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you to everyone who came tonight.
Thanks.
Thanks again to our sponsors, Lakeland Chapter of the Wisconsin Alumni Association, Kemp Natural Resources Station, Trout Lake Station, the Minocqua Public Library, WXPR, the Brittingham Foundation, and thanks especially to the Wisconsin Academy of Sciences, Arts, and Letters for sponsoring Mary and for visiting us tonight. Please remember about the event at Kemp Natural Resources Station this Saturday, January 13th at 1 p.m. With students from the Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design. And remember, our own next Science on Tap will be February 1st at Rocky Reef Brewing Company with Peter Levi from Northland College speaking on the Mississippi River watershed. If you want to sign up for email reminders of our events, we have a clipboard out by the snacks, and please fill out the form. And thank you, everyone, for coming, and we'll see you next month. Thanks, Mary.